at Stanford University.
Okay, well, welcome to lecture number 12 of Stanford CS 193P, fall of 2017. And today we're going to continue the demo we started with EmojiArt. And we learned a little bit about table view in the last one. This time we're going to learn more about collection view and also learn a little bit how drag and drop and collection view and table view all go together. Then I'm going to go back to the slides and talk about TextField. And I originally had planned to do a demo in EmojiArt of adding a text field in there, but we actually have to finish early today because there's some huge midterm in this room right after us, and we have to have time to clear out of here. So I will probably do that demo first thing next Monday, or I might just skip that demo. We'll see how it goes. All right, so back to EmojiArt here. What we're going to do is make, first I'm going to make EmojiArt scrollable because it just currently is fixed. Then we're going to add a collection view along the top there. You remember it from the demo where we're going to be able to choose our emoji from. And then we're going to add some drag and drop from that collection view, both into our view and into other apps and vice versa, etc. Okay, so let's take a quick look at what our app looks like so far. Okay. And it's basically working nicely in that we can pick up images, pick up an image here and drag it in and drop it to change it. And of course we have our table view on the left for choosing documents and adding documents. Of course we haven't hooked our table view up, and that's okay, but because we're going to do that next week. But one thing I want to have you note about this table view that's kind of annoying is that I can't get rid of it. Okay, see this table view right here? You can't swipe it away. And that's because essentially this app thinks it's in landscape mode on an iPad. And so, of course, this master and the detail, the split view are side by side. But since I'm in multitasking mode right here, so much of my screen is taken up with Safari over here on the right that it's annoying because I really want to focus on my EmojiArt document. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit how to make it so that that split view on the left can be slid out of the way, even in split view and landscape mode. So that's the first little thing we're going to do. So let's hop on over to our code over here and see how we do that. It's quite easy actually. Split view has a var, a property in it called preferred display mode, and you can control what happens with the master through that. And it's just that the default here is not what we want. Now the kind of kooky thing about that, I'm going to set this var in my master. Okay, so I'm going to go to my EmojiArt document table view controller, right? That's the table view controller with the 1, 2, 3, the thing that we want to slide out. And where I'm going to set it is kind of an unusual place. I'm going to set it in View Will Layout Subviews. Okay, and you might be like, whoa, View Will Layout Subview, that seems like a weird place to set that. Well, the reason I'm going to set it there is because when the layout changes of a split view, it often resets that preferred mode. Okay, so if I want to keep enforcing this thing of it, the master being in slide on top mode, I have to keep telling it to do that. But I also have to be careful because setting that preferred mode can cause it to relay out. So I don't want to end up in an infinite loop here, right? Where in layout subviews, I'm setting the preferred mode, it's causing a layout, I'm coming back in. So I'm going to do this by saying if my split view controller's preferred preferred display mode does not equal the one I want, and you can see there's quite a few here. There's primary overlay, there's primary hidden, there's automatic, there's always show both, etc. But the one I want is primary overlay. So if it's not primary overlay, then I'm going to set my split view controller's preferred display mode equal to primary overlay. Okay? And so that will keep enforcing it every time, even every time we rotate or whatever. I'm going to keep forcing this because I always want this table view to be appearing on top of my EmojiArt view, but I also want to be able to swipe it out of the way. Okay, I just swiped it out of the way. Well, you can't see. Hold on, I'll show you. Let me hide here, hide others. Okay, so here I'm swiping it in, and then I'm swiping it away. swiping it in, swiping it away. And I always want it to be that way because it's very unimportant to access this table. I just go in here, pick the document I want. Now that the document's in there, I want to be having as much room to drag my stuff in and work here as possible. Okay? So you understand that primary overlay thing? And I'm going to ask you to do that in your homework just so you can kind of see what it's all about there. All right, the next thing I want to do is to make it so that my EmojiArt view is scrollable and zoomable, right? Because right now it's just a fixed image. And we already know how to do that, so I'm not going to waste too much time showing you how to make it scrollable. I'm going to do it quickly, and I have some pre-canned code to do it, but it's nothing new. It's nothing that you haven't seen before in our previous demos. So I'm going to go back to my storyboard. Okay, here it is right here. I'm going to go down to this view controller right here. And instead of right now what we have, just to remind you, is we have this drop zone, and inside the drop zone we just put our EmojiArt view. That's why it's not scrollable right there. So I'm going to delete it, and instead I'm going to put a scroll view there. So I'm going to go down here and search for a scroll view. Here it is. I'm going to drag the scroll view in here. I'm going to pin the scroll view to the edges of the drop zone, of course. So I'll go here and just pin it right up to the edges. We know how to do that with this little pin thing. Bloop, it spins out. That's great. Now I'm going to create an outlet to this scroll view. Put it up, where are we going to put it? Let's put it right under the drop zone in here. So we'll control drag, create that scroll view. Okay, scroll view. Now we know that when we have a scroll view outlet like this, oh, by the way, down here, this EmojiArt view is no longer going to be an outlet. Okay, it's just going to be a regular var, and I'll just set it equal to creating one. This is exactly what we did with our image view in our other demo. Okay, so we haven't done anything new here. And when we have a scroll view like this, remember we got to set its minimum scroll view, maximum. We got to set the delegate. We got to implement that view for. Remember all that? So I'm going to do all that really quick here. I'm trying to remember what I call it. Yeah, emoji scroll. So here it is. Okay, here's all that code. I just pop it in there. In fact, let me go over here and show it in big so you can see it. So here's the scroll view outlet. So I just added a did set to it to set those things, right, the delegate, and then I added it as a subview. Here's view for zooming. Okay, we're obviously zooming in our EmojiArt view. Then I added a var here, EmojiArt background image, which does the stuff we need to do, like setting our content size equal to the frame. Right? Remember, we want that. We always want the frame of our image view to the same as our content size. I put a little bit of zooming code in here you can go look at later, which is kind of fun to give it an initial zoom that's good. And then, of course, we need to go down here and use this. So instead of just setting the EmojiArt view's background image directly, I'm going to use this EmojiArt background image var that I just created. Okay, that's this var right here. Okay, everybody see everything that I did right there? And of course, it's complaining that I'm not a UI split view or UI scroll view delegate, by the way. So I'll do that UI scroll view delegate. Okay, now I implement that. So let's make sure this all works. Okay, so here I am in my app. Okay, I'm just going to swipe that thing out of the way. I'm going to grab an image here and drag and drop it in. Here it is, and hopefully I can scroll. Woo, I can scroll way in. Scroll, pan around, scroll in. But you know what? That looks incredibly ugly. Okay, to have that thing in the upper left like that. If I really were working on this thing and I have to do all my work in the upper left, that would be absolutely ridiculous. So what I really want is I want this thing to stay centered. Okay, as I'm zooming in and out, okay, when I'm zoomed out here, and when I zoom in, I want to stay in the center, not jump up there to the left like that. So how am I going to do that? Well, there's a lot of ways to do that, actually. I'm going to do it in a simple way that lets me teach you about how to control the constraints in your storyboard from code. Okay? That's what this little thing is all about that I'm going to show you here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my storyboard. Okay? And I am going to have this scroll view right here always be centered. So I'm going to keep the scroll view in the center. Now, normally that's already happening because I'm pinned to the edges, so of course it's in the center. But what I'm going to do then is have the scroll view's width and height stick to its content size. So if you zoom in so that the content area gets really small, the scroll view is going to get small and it's going to stay centered. So that's how we're going to do this. That's the trick. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Well, of course we need to make it so our scroll view right here stays centered. So I'm going to click down here and just pick horizontally and vertically in the container, so now it's centered. Again, that's not doing anything because of those other constraints. But I still want these other constraints over here. I just don't want them to be fixed. I want them to be greater than or equal. This is something we did in a previous one as well. So I'm going to edit all of these ones about the edges to just be greater than equals, because I really just want my scroll view to never go outside the bounds. But I'm fine if my scroll view gets smaller than the bounds. I just don't want it to get bigger than the bounds. So that's why I'm putting this greater than or equals into here. Okay? Now you can see that things have turned red. That's because it's undetermined right now what size the scroll view is. Okay? Because we turn those equals to be greater than or equal, so it doesn't know how big it is. So I'm going to fix the size to start. I'm going to control drag to itself and fix both its width and height. Okay, that fixes it. But of course now the scroll view is always going to be this size, which is, we'll look over here and find out, 748 by 703.5. Okay, so I clearly don't want that. What I want to be able to do is make these width and height equal to the scroll view's content size. Now, unfortunately, I can't do that here. There's no way to control drag to do that. I have to do that in code. So I'm going to make outlets to these two constraints and then modify those outlets in code. Okay, so that width and height is controlled by my code. So that is the trickery here. And the last thing I want to do, though, is I'm going to try and set the scroll view size to its content size. But if it gets really big, I want these other constraints to win. I want the constraints that keep it from going outside the edges to win. So that's why I'm going to set the priority of these two height ones, the height and width ones, to be lower. Okay, so here's the priority over here. It's currently at the required level. I'm going to move it down to low priority for both of them. Okay, and so that'll be fine when it's inside the bounds because it won't be conflicting, but once this scroll view gets big, because I zoom way in, then it'll get pinned to the edges, which is perfect. All right, so how do I make outlets to these? Just control drag, of course. So I'm going to bring up my code and we'll put it right there. So I'm going to control drag from width over here. You can see that the type of this outlet is NSLayout constraint. I'll call this my scroll view width. Okay, same thing here with the height. We'll control drag. This one's going to be my scroll view height. Now, what are we going to change about these constraints? Well, if you look at the constraints in the inspector, okay, let's inspect these constraints, like inspect width. These are all the things you can set in a constraint, right? The items involved, the relationship, whether it's equal or greater than or less than. And look, you can set the constant, which is currently 703.5. This is the thing I want to change to fix my width, okay, this constant right here. So I'm just going to change that constant in my code. Now, when do I need to change it? So you can see here. Hey, when do I need to change these constants? Well, anytime I zoom, I definitely need to change it, right? Because as I'm zooming, I want my scroll view to be changing size. So that's in scroll view did zoom delegate method. Okay, and all I'm going to do in here is set my scroll view height constant equal to the scroll view's content size dot height. And same thing here, the scroll view width dot constant is equal to the scroll view content size dot width. Okay, so I'm just fixing the width of the scroll view to its content size. Now again, if it gets too big, this constraint is going to lose because it's low priority. The other place I need to do it is obviously when I first set up the image down here, when I'm first setting all these content size and all that. So right here, I'm going to be careful and optionally chain in case this gets called during a prepare. Might do that. And then I have the content size actually in a local variable here, size, from setting these things up here. Okay, and that's it. So let's go see if this is enough to make this work. And controlling your constraints from code, I'm going to show you another example. I'm not going to actually do the other example because I don't have time in the demo to show you things twice. But we'll see another place where it would make sense in this very app. So here I'm going to drag in. Okay, it's sizing it to this size. Now watch, I'm going to zoom in. The scroll view is staying the size of its content size. Oh, I'm sorry, you guys can't see. Good call. Always remind me of that because it's hard for me to remember that. So what I did was I dragged this in, started here, okay? And now I just shrink it down, and you can see that the scroll view's bounds are staying hooked to its content. And even if I make it very large, Now the scroll view bounds are way bigger than the borders, but those other constraints are higher priority. So the scroll view is actually, you can see its scroll view indicators there on the right edge. It's actually staying inside the bounds. Okay? So pretty simple, cool fix for keeping this thing centered right here. All right, so that's that little trick. Let's get back to our code and start talking about our collection view. Here it is. Okay, so we're going to add that collection view along the top that just has a bunch of emoji that we're going to use to drag in to our little UI. And how are we going to do that? Well, it's pretty easy actually. Let's start in the storyboard. Okay, and here's our, this is where we're going to be adding it, right here, same place we just were. Now, one thing about when you're manipulating your views, there's a really strong tendency to dive right in here to these things and just start grabbing the handles, okay? Grab this, like I want to put this collection view on top, so I really want to just grab this handle and pull it down to make room. But you cannot do that because you have constraints that are holding that thing to the top. And if you just start dragging it down, all your constraints are going to turn red and yellow. Things are just going to be terrible. So if you really want to pull that down, you got to unhook it first. Okay, and really, this requires you to go a little bit slower when you're kind of editing to think ahead, am I going to have to unhook something? So we definitely have to unhook this top connection here of the drop zone to the top of the view because we're going to put a collection view in between there. All right, so where is that connection to the top? Okay, I've got the drop zones selected here in the outline, and here we got right here, okay, align top to the safe area. I'm just going to delete that. Okay, now it's no longer hooked to the top. Now I can safely drag it down to make room for my collection view. And then eventually I'm going to put my collection view in and put a constraint that hooks the collection view in. All right, so how do we get a collection view? We just go down here and search for collection view. This is the, you know, pre-packaged MVC, but I already got my MVC, so I just want this one, which is the collection view. I'm going to drop it in here. Let's go ahead and do its constraints. So I want it hooked right up to the top. I want it right to the left, right to the right. I actually want some standard spacing here to the bottom, which I'm hoping it's going to say its nearest neighbor is that drop zone. So let's try that. Oh, looks like it worked. But what happened to my collection view? It disappeared. Okay, why did my collection view disappear? Let's look at its constraints. Okay, here's its constraints. It's got the trailing, leading, bottom space to the drop zone, top to the safe area. What's the height of the collection view? Not specified, right? It's like 0. We never set the height. Now, what do we want the height to be? Actually, we want the height to kind of be big enough to include those emoji, and we want those emoji to be whatever size the user's accessibility font is, right? That's what we really want. I don't have time to show you that, but you know what you need to know to make that work, because what we would do is create the height constraint in here, okay, and then wire it up into our code, and then we would set it based on the size that is necessary to fit the font, the accessibility font. But in this case, what we're going to do is we're just going to fix its height. So I'm going to go here. Okay, I've got the collection view selected. Oops, wrong one. I'm going to go here and fix its height. I'm going to fix its height to be about 80 points high or so. 80 points is enough to make an emoji that kind of fits under your finger nicely, and it's a good default size. So there's my collection view reappearing. Another thing we want to do is set the size of these cells, okay? Because we're going to have a bunch of cells in our collection view. That's what a collection view is, a bunch of cells in there. Remember from the food demo is all the food things. So you do that by inspecting the collection view under the size inspector over here. And you can see our cell size is 50 by 50. I'm going to make it a little bigger. Let's go, whoops, 80 by 80. And there's one other thing we want to do about this collection view, is that we want it to be scrollable horizontally. We want all those emojis to be falling off to the right, or to the side of the screen. We don't want them going down. So I'm going to go back to the normal inspector of our collection view and make sure that my scroll direction is horizontal. Okay, so that it's scrolling horizontally. Collection view can only scroll in one of two directions, either vertically or horizontally. It doesn't do both. The other thing about collection view, very important to understand, never make your cell size bigger than the non-scrollable width or height of the collection view. Okay? Collection view does not know how to have cells that are bigger than will fit in the direction it doesn't scroll. Okay? So you have to ensure, like in your homework, you're going to be making your cells different sizes. Make sure you never make it bigger than the width of the collection view. Okay, it doesn't really know how to deal with that. Okay, so this is nice. Now, these cells are just going to have an emoji in them, remember? So let's go ahead and put a UI label in there so we can put our emoji in there. Okay, we'll just put this in here. Let's go ahead and just do, how about vertically and horizontally centered. Let's make the font a lot bigger, although I'm going to set the font in code, again, because I want it to be accessibility friendly there, but just so that it looks nice in my storyboard, I'll set it to 64 point, nice and big. And then I'm also going to put just a nice little smiley face or something in there. So again, this is mostly, I'm doing this just so it looks nice in the storyboard right here, so I can kind of imagine what my thing is going to look like right here. Okay, now let's go to our code and start loading up this collection view with some emoji. All right, let's go over here. Let's bring up our code. We have to create an outlet to it, of course, so let's go down here right before all our drop business, and we'll put our collection view stuff here. So I'm just going to control drag from the collection view into my code, make sure that it's in the collection view. It is. I'm going to call it, I'll call it emoji collection view. Okay, so there's my emoji collection view. Now, whenever you wire up a collection view like this, okay, where you've dropped it into an MVC, the very first thing you're going to want to do, okay, all the time, is go and do did set and set your new collection view's data source to be yourself and the emoji collection view's delegate to be yourself. Now, if you do that pre-packaged collection view thing where you get the whole MVC, it'll do this for you. But if you drag your own collection view in, you definitely want to do this. And of course, it's complaining that I don't implement those protocols, so we'll go up to the top and say UI collection view data source and UI collection view delegate. And by the way, while you're here, you probably also want to do UI collection view delegate flow layout. Okay, this one you automatically get to be if you're the collection view delegate. This is the delegate of the thing that does all that text-like flowing layout. Remember, the collections layout is completely configurable, but this is the default one, so I usually throw this in here too. It just helps with escape completion and all those kind of things. Now, it's complaining because I don't implement one of these protocols. Let's find out which one. It's the one UI collection view data source. Okay, I don't implement that. It has required methods in its protocol, even though it's an Objective-C protocol. Let's see what they are. I'm going to hit fix, and it added them for me right at the top of my file. I'm going to move them. But the two are number of items in section and cell for item at. Of course, those are two of the three we talked about. The other one was number of sections. We don't have to implement that because it defaults to 1. Okay, that's true for table view, true for collection view as well. So I'm going to move these back down here where the rest of my collection view stuff is, and we're going to implement those. So we need kind of like a model for this part of our MVC, and this is my model, which is an array of emoji strings. So I actually took a string of emojis and I mapped it to an array of strings. Hopefully everybody's getting comfortable with map. Map just takes a collection and turns it into an array where it executes this closure on each of the items. Okay, so now emojis, if you look at its type, is array of string, and each string is one emoji. Okay, so how many items do I have in my only section? Well, of course, it's the number of emojis. Okay, that's how many items there are in the collection view. I only have one section. And that brings us down here to the all-important cell for item at, where we have to let some cell equal collection view DQ reusable cell with reuse identifier, right? And we're going to have to specify something. I'll call it an emoji cell. And for index path. Okay, that's the index path we're creating this cell for. And we're going to just return cell. Okay, now we need to load up this emoji into that cell. And for collection view, all the cells are custom cells. You have to have a subclass of, if you're going to have any outlets to anything, you have to have a subclass, because we couldn't have an outlet in our collection view itself that pointed to the emoji, because there could be 100 cells, and so we can't do it. So instead, we have to go and create a new file, which is a subclass of UI collection view cell. Okay, it's actually, they're on the right one. I'm going to call this an emoji collection view cell, right? Subclass of UI collection view cell. So let's create it here. Let's put it in the right place. Okay, here it is, right here. Okay, I'm going to immediately go to my storyboard. Where's my storyboard? Here it is. And I'm going to inspect this cell. And I'm going to set its reuse identifier to emoji cell. That was the thing I DQ whatever reusable cell with. And I'm going to set its identity to be an emoji collection view cell. All right? So this cell is of type my subclass. And its identifier of this cell, oh, didn't I type that in there? Emoji cell? Emoji cell, that's its type. Okay? All right, so now that we have this, let's go ahead and wire up this little label where we're going to put the emoji to that custom cell. Now, a lot of times, Interface Builder will not get this right, but it did this time, where if you go to automatic mode, it kind of realizes that that thing that you have selected could be hooked up to the controller if there were just one of them, or more likely it's hooked up to this custom cell. Okay? So you don't have to use automatic. You could use manual and go find the file. But automatic sometimes will work, sometimes not. Okay? So here we go. We've got this label. I'm just going to create an outlet to it in my custom subclass. So here we go. And in there, it's a UI label. I'll call it label. Okay? It's this cell's label. And that's it. Now, I'm not putting any other code in here, but I could. Okay? It would not be unreasonable to put a bunch of logic in your cell. If you have logic that is per cell, then putting it here could make a lot of sense. Okay? Just because this one only has an outlet, it's a very, very simple cell, it doesn't mean you couldn't put other code in there. I don't want you to get the idea these are only outlet bags. They actually could have logic in them if it made sense as well. Probably will make sense in your homework to have some logic in your cells. All right, so we got this cell. So let's go back now to our place where we're creating this cell, and we've got this DQ'd reusable cell. For us to access the outlets of it, we have to cast it. We have to say if let emoji cell equal the cell as our custom subclass, emoji collection view cell. And if we can successfully cast it, then we can tell the emoji cell label, okay, to set its attributed text equal to something, okay, text. So what is that something? Well, that something is going to be take one of these, whatever thing is at this index path, and set its font, because I want to control its font in code, and then put it in there. So I'm just going to let text equal an NS attributed string. The string of it is going to be the emojis sub index path.item. That tells us which emoji we're talking about here. And the attributes, I'm going to just set the attributes of the font. That's the only attribute I'm going to set. I'm going to set it to this var font, which I'm going to create up here, private var font, which is going to be UI font. And I'm going to do the whole accessibility thing here, which is I have to use UI font metrics, all right? And I want the font metrics for the text style.body, okay? And I'm going to scale a font, scaled font 4, and the font I'm going to use is UI font preferred font body, but I'm going to scale it up. I'll say with size, a little easier. With size 64. Okay, so I want 64 point, but I'm going to have it scaled by whatever the accessibility thing is, right? So if your accessibility is in the middle, size of font, I'm going to do 64. If you make it bigger, it'll be bigger than 64 and smaller. Now, this is not going to work very well right now because I don't change the collection view's size. Because if I set this big, it's going to be cut off. And if I set it really small, the collection view won't shrink up to kind of hold it. Do you see what I'm saying? You understand what I mean by that? So we'd have to add that later. But again, I don't want to show you hooking up to a layout constraint twice. OK, so that's it. This is all we need to do to get our collection view loaded up. We implemented those data source methods that are required, right? Number of sections, number of items in section, and then the cell for a certain one. And so let's go over here so you can see. And sure enough, along the top, we can see right there that we have our emojis. And it's really nice. Scrolls, okay? Collection view is a scroll view, so it's scrolling back and forth. It's very nice. Now, the next thing we want to do is be able to pick these things up and drop them in our nice background, like if this is our background here, we want to pick these things up. Remember, I dropped the bees in there, the apple or whatever. We want to do that. Okay, so how are we going to do drag and drop? Well, we haven't done drag yet. We only did drop. The only thing we've done is dropping in there. So I'm going to show you drag in collection views world, which looks almost exactly the same as non-collection view world. The only difference between drag and collection view world is collection view helps you out with which index path are you dragging. Okay, it knows where your finger is, and it's like, oh, you're dragging that index path, and you're dropping it at that index path. So really just providing index path, but otherwise it's pretty much exactly the same. All right, anytime you want to do dragging in a collection view, the first thing you're always going to do, just like you do a drop interaction is the first time you do drag and drop with a view, with a collection view, you're going to set your collection view's drag delegate to be yourself. Okay, and then of course you're going to go up here and you're going to say, yes, I implement the UI collection view drag delegate. And as soon as you do that, it's going to complain, oh no you don't, and you're going to click on this and it's going to say, do you want me to add the protocol stubs? And you can say, yeah, sure, what do I need to do? And it's going to say, you have to implement items for beginning. Okay, if you remember from the lecture, items for beginning is the thing that tells the drag system, here's what we're dragging. So we have to provide these drag items to drag. So let's do that. Let's move this down again and in here. Okay, so how are we going to provide our items for beginning? Now notice the collection view one has add index path. So it tells us which index path we are dragging from, which is really, really convenient for us. So I'm going to I'm going to call a little function here. I'm just going to return drag items at index path. This is a function I'm going to have to write. Okay, private func drag items at index path, which is an index path, which is just the section and item, and it returns this array of UI drag item. Those are the items that we have to return. Okay, so this is all we have to do to get started with drag. And for us, again, it's really, really easy to implement this because what we're going to drag is NS attributed strings. Okay, that's what we're going to drag. That's an item provider, just like NS URL, UI image, NS attributed string. Also NS string we could do, but we're going to do NS attributed string. It gives it a little more flexibility for what we're dragging around, okay? So that's going to be our item provider. So all we have to do is get the attributed string we want to drag and then return it in the drag item, and that's it. So how do we get that attributed string? So I'm going to say if I can let the attributed string equal, and what I'm going to have to do is look at this index path, find my custom cell, look at its outlet, get its attributed text. Everybody cool with that? That's how I'm going to do this. So let's do this all in one line of code, right? So I'm going to first ask my collection view for the cell for this item at index path. Now, this is like table views cell for row at index path thing. This only works for visible cells, but of course that's going to work here. I'm dragging this thing. It's got to be visible, right? So I got this cell that we're dragging from right here. Now I'm going to as it to be my custom subclass, okay? And if that works, hopefully it will, I'm going to get its outlet, and then I'm going to grab its attributed text. Okay, so if all that works, I just grabbed the emoji at that index path. So now that I have the emoji, all I need to do is create one of these UI drag items using that attributed string as the provider, right? The thing that provides the data. So I can do that by saying let drag item equal UI drag item. And the drag item creator, you can see it right there, takes an item provider. And we can create an item provider for an attributed string by saying item provider. And it has a few constructors, but a really nice one is this one, object, where you just give it an object that knows how to be a provider, like a UI image or an NS attributed string. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to give it this attributed string that I found in my cell. And that's it. This creates the drag item, and now we just return this. We return an array of them, but we're only dragging this one thing. But before I return it, I'm going to do one other thing. I'm going to set the drag item's local object to be that attributed string. Now, what does this mean? Well, if your drag is local within your app, you don't have to go through all that item provider stuff, right? The asynchronous, getting the data from the, remember all the stuff we had to do in the drop? You don't have to do any of that. You just grab the local object. So this is a way of like short-circuiting all that if it's a local drag. But it's going to work to actually drag out of our collection view to other apps. But when we're dragging locally, we're going to be able to use this. So here I'm just going to return an array of just this one drag item. By the way, if I couldn't get the attributed string out of that cell for some reason, okay, then I'm just going to return empty. So no, don't do any drag then. Okay, so it's going to know from this not to begin a drag. Now remember, I also told you that once you start a drag, you can add more items by just tapping on them, so that you could be dragging multiple things at once. That's easy to implement as well. Just like we have this items for beginning, we have another one called items for adding to, okay, which looks exactly the same as this, and we're going to return exactly the same thing, because it's giving us the index path that someone tapped on while I was dragging, and I'm just going to get the emoji out of it and return it. And this is all that's required to do dragging. Watch this. Okay, I can drag just from that. Watch. Here's the B, hold down, and drag. Okay, and the thing about this is, if I'm dragging, I can't drop in my collection view because I haven't implemented drop, but I can drop other places. I'm going to go over here and just drop this B in the Google search bar, and it searched for B, believe it or not. Okay, so that's pretty cool. So I've got drag and drop working to other apps. I hardly had to do anything in my app. Just provide that attributed string and drag and drop. So that's one of the cool things about drag and drop. It's so easy to get it going in both directions. So now we want the drop. Now we want to be able to pick this B up right here and drop it somewhere else in our collection view. So let's go do that. All right, so to do the drop part of this, just like we did when we went to do the drag delegate here, we have to do emoji collection view dot drop delegate equals self, and up to the top. And look how many protocols we implement. Woo, we're cruising today. So let's do UI collection view drop delegate. And when we do that, wait for it to compile. It's going to complain. It says you don't implement that protocol. Sure, fix. And it says this one you must implement, which is perform drop. Okay, makes sense, right? You're doing drop, you have to do perform drop, or just, you're not even doing drop. So let's copy and paste that one down here. I'm actually going to implement perform drop last, because there's a couple other ones that I need to implement. If you remember from what we did before, can handle and session moved, right? The session updated. We got to implement those two so that we get the right little plus sign when we're dragging it around, and so that we don't try and accept drops that we don't understand. So let's do the can handle. Okay, here's can handle's collection view version. Okay, can handle looks almost exactly the same, and we implement it exactly the same, which is I'm just going to say if the session can load objects of class NS attributed string, then I'm in. Okay, because that's what my collection view can accept. This, by the way, means we're going to be able to drag just random strings into our collection view, not just emoji. And at first I was like, I don't want that. But then I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. What if I wanted to put a label on something down in my picture? So I decided, oh, that's good. So I'm going to keep doing that. Then we have the session did update that we have to do. Session did update, is that what it's called? Did update, is this the one? Yes, drop session did update. And what do we need to do in here? This is where we need to return that drop proposal, right? Either copy, move, or cancel. That's all we have to do. And you can see that here it's a UI collection view drop proposal. And why is that different? Well, let's take a look at it. Let's return a UI collection view drop proposal. And look at the constructors. And there's another constructor. Second one, look at that, intent, UI collection view drop intent. Well, the intent in a collection view says, are you dropping this into this cell, or you want to add a cell? You see the difference? So that's what we have to specify. Now, in our case, we always want to add a cell. So you'll see that our intent, let's go back and pick that. We want this constructor. So the drop operation we're going to do at first is copy. I'm going to change that in a second. But then the drop intent we want is insert at destination as opposed to insert into the destination cell. Now let's talk about copy. if I'm moving the B around inside my collection view, I'm not copying it. And I don't want the user to think that the B is going to now be copied and there'll be two Bs. Okay? So it's move. So I have to know somehow that I am inside my own collection view. Okay? So how am I going to do that? Well, what I'm going to do, what's this problem, by the way? This is index path. Yeah. So how am I going to do that? What I'm going to do is when I start my drag up here in items for beginning, I'm going to set something in the session called the local context. And this is an any, type any, and I'm going to set it to be my collection view. Okay, so this is just something in the drag session that lets droppies, people who drop, know, hey, this is a local drag, and here's the context of it. Well, since this drag is coming from the collection view, I'm going to use the collection view as the context. All right, so now I can look at this local context down here to determine whether my drag proposal should be a copy or a move. So I want to say something like, let isSelf, is myself or whatever, equal the session. It has a thing called the local drag session. Okay, that's the session that started it. Dot local context. Oops, local context. I really want to say if that equals my collection view. Okay, this is what I'd like to do, but I cannot do this because this, what type is it? Any. And you cannot do equals equals with any, because remember that equals equals is just using the equatable protocol, right? And any can't have any methods or vars. It has to be casted to something before you can do anything on it. So you certainly can't have equatable for any. You can't have anything for any. So what I'm going to do is take this little thing and attempt to cast it as a UI collection view. I mean, if it's not a UI collection view, it's not going to be equal anyway. So I might as well try it. Now, if that's nil, we can do equatable with nil, because optional can do equatable. All right? So now I know whether it's myself or not. So if it's myself, then I'm just going to do move. Otherwise, I'm going to do copy. Okay, now I haven't even implemented perform drop yet, but let's take a look at what the collection view does just with this small amount of information from us. Okay, so here's my collection view right here. Now watch, I'm going to drag the coffee here. Look at the collection view. Look what it's doing. It's making space for me to drop in the new spot. You see that? Okay, I can still drag over here, but now I'm dragging over here, and it knows that, oh, I might be dropping there. And in fact, if I drop, it doesn't work because I haven't implemented perform drop. But you can see the collection view is already knowing what I'm doing. Okay, so collection view, really cool for doing drag and drop. It's so powerful. We hardly do any, we've written like 4 lines of code, okay, to get this far in the drop. So let's go back here and do perform drop. Well, our string of 4 lines of code is going to end because perform drop is a little bit more complicated. Not a lot, but when the perform drop happens, we have to update our model, which is our list of emojis, and we have to update the collection view. All right? Also, there's 2 different kinds of drops here. There's the drop where it's coming from my collection view, in which case I have to drop it in the new place and remove it from the old place because I'm moving. And then there's the dropping, it's coming from some other app, okay? Which is allowed. Watch this. Let's go over here and select some text. Oh, sorry, you're not on the screen. Yep, thank you. I will show you this. All right, others. Okay, so I can go over here, okay, and select this B, okay, and drag and drop it over here, and look, it's saying plus, and it's making room for it, and I didn't do perform drop. So I have those 2 cases to do perform drop, the local case and that case. So let's go do both those cases. We'll do the local case first. Okay, now when we drop, collection view gives us this coordinator. Okay, this coordinator, I'm going to make this a little easier to read because it's so long. A name here. You can see there's 2 arguments to this thing. One is just the collection view that's involved, and the other one is this coordinator. Now this coordinator is going to give us all the information we need to know to do this drop. Okay, the first thing it's going to tell us, the most important thing, is the destination index path. Okay, this is obviously the index path where we're dropping, and that's equal to the coordinator destination index path, but that might be nil. because you might be dragging it in a part of the collection view that's not in between any of the existing cells. So this could be nil. So if that happens, I'm just going to create an index path with item 0 in section 0. Okay, I could pick some other index path, but that's what I'm going to use as my default. Okay, so now we know where we are dropping this drop. And now it's just a matter of going through all the items in the coordinators items. Okay, these items are UI collection view drop items, and they have some very interesting pieces of information. For example, if I can let source index path equal this item's source index path, then I know that this drag is coming from myself, and this is the source index path of it. So I don't even need to look at the local context in this case to know this is coming from me. Awesome, and I know now the source and the destination. This is trivial. All I need to do here is update my model to have the source going to the destination, and then update the collection view to remove the one from the source and add it to the other one. Okay? So this is probably the easiest case, this local case. So let's do it. First, let's get the attributed string that we need. So I can say if I can let the attributed. This is the attributed string that we're dragging around. And luckily, I stashed it in that local object. Remember that? So I'm going to get the drag item, and get its local object. Okay, remember I stashed it in local object up here when I made the drag item? Woohoo! I don't have to do any of that provider stuff to get it. But I am going to have to say as ns attributed string because it's an any. Okay, so if I get to the attributed string, which I'm going to be able to because I know I set that, then I can put the attributed string in the new place and move the other one from the old place. So here we go. I'm going to say emojis. This is my model. Remove at the source index path dot item. So remove where the thing came from. And emojis insert this attributed string that's being dragged around at the destination index path dot item. Voila, I've updated my model. Okay, I moved the B from one place to the other. Okay, destination index path. Oh, this one probably also up here. Oh, curly brace. Okay, so I've updated the model. Now I have to update the collection view itself. Okay, which is oh, no, that's not a curly brace. What did I do up there? Item, yeah, thank you, item. All right, so now I've updated my model. Now we're going to update the collection view. So that's collection view. Now I could, okay, one thing I don't want to do here, very important to understand, don't reload data here. Okay, do not reload data in the middle of a drag because it resets the whole world. It's bad, don't do it. So instead, I got to remove the rows and insert the rows separately. So I'm going to delete the rows at the source index path, and then I'm going to insert rows, insert item, sorry, I keep saying rows, used to table view, at the destination index path. Okay, now this looks like it insert items. Okay, so this looks like this would work fine, but actually this would probably crash your program. And the reason for that is when you do multiple, this is index.string. When you do multiple changes to your collection view, okay, each step would normally have to have your model completely in sync, which it wouldn't be because until I do both of these, the table won't be in sync with the model. But there's a really cool way to get around that, which is collection view and table view have this method called perform batch updates. And perform batch updates just has a closure. Inside that closure, you can put any number of these delete items, insert items, move items, whatever you want to do, and it will do them all as one operation so that it never gets out of sync with your model. See what's happening there? It also has a nice completion thing here, which we don't need in this case, but that'll, when it's all done with all the updates, it'll call that completion closure. So don't forget to do batch updates if you do multiple adjustments to your table view or collection view. And then the last thing we need to do is ask the coordinator to do the drop. Okay, the reason we need to do this is we need to animate the drop happening right there. Okay, so we're going to do the drop. The drag item is the item's drag item, and the item at is the destination index path. Okay, so that's going to actually make the drop happen. So this is going to animate and move the B over. This is going to, at the same time, be dropping the, the thing that's under your finger is going to disappear, and the plus sign will go away, and all that business. All right, so let's take a look at this. All right, here we go. Now, we've only done the local case, but here it is. The B, moving it around, and drop. Woohoo! It worked, right? This over here, drop. Okay, now this one over here from outside is still not going to work. Okay, doesn't work because that's not the local case, right? Okay, so let's do the local case. All right, so that's the else of this right here, okay? Yeah, it's the else of, not that one, the else of this one. Okay, the else of this source index path. So we don't have a source index path, which means this thing comes from somewhere else. So how we do this? Now this turns out to be quite easy to do too, amazingly, but there's a little problem here. If you're dragging something from outside and you drop it, is that information immediately available? No. Okay, you have to asynchronously go fetch it from that thing. Well, what the heck are you going to do with your table while you're off fetching that? What if it takes 10 seconds? So what you do is you put a placeholder in your table, and CollectionView manages all that for you, so that all you have to do is when the data finally does arrive, you tell the placeholder context it's called, okay, I got the info, update your model, and it'll automatically swap out the placeholder cell for one of your cells that matches the kind of data you have. So let's see how we do that. We do this by creating a placeholder context. This is the thing that's going to manage that placeholder. And the placeholder context you get from the coordinator, by asking it to drop the item, okay, to a placeholder. You see the second initializer there, drop the item to a placeholder. So I'm going to do this one. So the item we want to drag is the item.drag item. Remember, we're still in this for loop where we're dropping, because we could be dropping multiple items, right? So we're dropping them one by one. So that's what we're dragging. And then here's the placeholder right here. So I got to create one of these. Let me make this a little more readable for you here. Okay. Let me put this on another line. All right, so I got to create a UI drop placeholder. And to do that, it needs to know where you're going to insert the placeholder, and then it has a reuse identifier, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. So let's put the insertion path index to be, obviously, the destination, okay, where we're putting this in. That's this thing we calculated right at the beginning up here, okay, that's the destination. And look at this reuse identifier. What the heck is that? Well, you get to decide what kind of cell is the placeholder. Okay, it doesn't put some pre-packaged one in, you get to decide. So this is asking you for the reuse identifier in your storyboard to use to create that thing. So I'm going to call mine drop placeholder cell. Okay, I can call it anything I want. This is just the string that I'm going to use in my storyboard to create this thing. Now, what's interesting also is you can also include at the end of this a closure, and in that closure you can basically initialize this cell or do the same kind of thing you would do where you do the DQ reusable cell, because that DQ reusable cell is never going to be called. This is the placeholder cell. It's not going to call that thing. So here you could do the same kind of setup. If you had outlets in your cell or whatever, you could set them all up. We're not going to have any outlets in ours, so we're not going to do it, but that's where you would do it. Okay, so did I remember? Okay, so I just want to make sure we got this all right. No errors. Okay, so let's go back to our storyboard and make that placeholder cell. The way you make a cell in a collection view, you just select the collection view and go over to inspect it, and the very first thing is the items, and I want from 1 item to 2 items. Okay, and it makes a second item right here. And I'm going to go make sure I say it's not an emoji cell, it's a drop placeholder cell. Okay, that's how I'm linking it to that code I just wrote, that line of code I just wrote. Its type doesn't have to be emoji collection view cell because it's not going to have the emoji in there. So I'm going to make it just be a normal UI collection view cell. Okay, nothing special. And it doesn't need this little label on the inside because it's a placeholder for the label. The information hasn't arrived yet. So instead, I'm going to put an activity indicator in there. Okay, so it's spinning there, letting the user know I'm waiting on some dropped data. Okay, so I'm going to put it in there. Let's go ahead and center it. Okay, and let's, yeah, that's probably good enough. And, oh, let's make it so it starts off animating. So I'm going to click it right here so it starts off animating, so I don't even have to tell it to animate. All right, and all that. And what are we missing here? Oh, emoji cell. I thought I changed that. I guess not. Oh, yeah. Didn't I change that already? I did. Placeholder cell. Okay, so now that we have this set up for this placeholder cell, we go back here to our code. No, not there. Down here. Okay, and we've got this nice placeholder ready to go. All we need to do now is go get the data, and when it arrives, we just tell the placeholder context, okay, here's the, go swap them out, and here's my model change. So I'm going to get the data a little differently than we got before. Last time we used the method loadObjects, plural, on session to load up the objects. Remember that when we dropped the image in there? This time I'm just going to grab one thing, not load objects, but grab one object that was in my item. So I'm going to say here item.drag item dot item provider. So this is the item provider, the thing that's providing me the item, provides it asynchronously because it's outside of my app. Load object, I'm going to say, of class, I want an NS attributed string. Okay, and it gives it back to me asynchronously with the provider, that's going to be the attributed string, and also possibly an error, which we're going to ignore the error. You can look at the documentation to see what kind of errors you can get, but you can imagine, right, errors providing this data. Now, this particular closure is not executed on the main queue. Okay, so this one we need to unfortunately say dispatch queue.main.async if we want to do anything to our UI, which we do. What we're going to do here is we're going to change our model, which is going to cause some UI stuff to happen. Now, it could be actually that changing this would not affect the UI directly because we're only changing our model. But the problem is we're going to do it in the context of asking the placeholder to replace that cell, and that's certainly going to cause UI. So how do we do this? We just say placeholder context, commit the insertion, okay, of my data. And this right here is the insertion index path. And here is the code to fix my model. And that's it. This is all we need to do, and it will automatically replace that placeholder with a cell by calling your normal cell for item at methods. Notice that this insertion index path might be different than this destination index path. Why? Because this might have taken 10 seconds. Okay, not likely, but it might have. So it might have changed. Other things in the collection view might have been going on. Okay, new cells adding, other things came faster, whatever. So always use the insertion index here. Okay, and you're only using it to update your model. So how do I update my model here? Well, that's my emojis dot insert the thing that came back, which is this provider as an attributed string. So let's say if we can let attributed string equal the provider as an NS attributed string. Okay, then we can do this. So we'll insert that attributed string at the insertion index path dot item. Okay, that updates our model. This thing handles the rest. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to do any inserting rows, any of that business. Oh yeah, this is attributed string dot string, okay, because we have just strings in our model, not attributed strings. And of course, we need to do self dot right here because we're inside a closure. Okay, now if for some reason you couldn't get that attributed string from the provider, maybe there's an error instead, then you want to let the placeholder context know to delete that placeholder, okay, because you couldn't get the other string after all. So you get, and that's it. Okay, this is all you have to do to accept stuff into a collection view from somewhere else. So let's see this in action right here. Okay, so we haven't hopefully broken our local. Nope, still working. And hopefully we can get our B and drop it in. Here we go. Woohoo, we got a B. Now our font is really big, so we can't see it. We'd probably want to have our font self-adjust or whatever. But this is, you know, just like anything else. Now we can move this around. It's part of our collection view, etc. Okay? So that's collection view, drag and drop, start to finish. Not really that complicated. It's actually they did a pretty good job. Now, the next thing we want to do is to drag these things into our image, right? We have our, let me go back to my images here. Where's my favorite image? Well, we'll pick some random image. Here we go. All right, so I have my image here, and we want to be able to pick up an apple and put it under the tree, okay? So how are we going to do that drag and drop? Well, all we need to do is implement dropping of NS attributed strings in our EmojiArt view. That's all we need to do, and that is so simple. Let's do that quickly here. This time is running out, so let's go to our EmojiArt view. So here's our EmojiArt view. Kind of looks very simplistic at this point. And I'm going to add a drop interaction to it, okay, in its initializers. So I have this nice thing I type, which is the template for having UI view initializers. Remember, you have to override both these inits. Remember that? And then I have this nice setup. So in the setup right here, I'm just going to add interaction. And remember, I'm in a UI view now, so I'm adding it to myself. UI drop interaction with the delegate being myself. Okay, so now I am a UI drop interaction delegate. I also have a nice little thing here, drop stubs, that just gives me the stubs for the three methods: can handle, did update, perform drop. You should be used to this now, same as we had with the collection view, but these are the non-collection versions. And so what do I do in can handle? I just say whether I can load the objects of the right class, in this case, attributed strings. And what do I do in session did update? I have to return a drop proposal. Here, I'm always going to allow dropping an attributed string. And it's always going to be a copy, because I'm not going to move things inside myself with drag and drop. I'm going to move them directly. So I'll always do copy here. And then finally, I just have to load objects of a certain class, NS attributed strings, of course. Okay, this is the list of attributed strings. The item providers are attributed strings. And here, I just need to add these things to my view as subviews, add labels subview. So I'm going to do this with a little function here, add label, that I'm going to write, and it's going to get the attributed string. So let's get the attributed string that we need out of here. Actually, I also need to know where to drop it. So let's get the drop point by saying, Mr. Session, drag session, what is the location of this drag in my coordinate system? Okay, so I'm just finding out where this thing is dropped. I obviously need to know where it's dropped to be able to do it. So then let's add all the things that drop by doing a little for loop, for attributed string in the providers as an array of attributed string, which it should be. Maybe you didn't know you could do this, but you can say as an array right in the middle of a for loop like this. In fact, you can even say if that for some reason is nil, because you can't as it, then just use an empty array right here. Okay, that's kind of a cool trick. All right, so we're going to add a label with the attributed string. Okay, we're doing this for each one, and we're going to have it be centered at the drop point. Okay, so we have to write this method ourselves to do that. Private func, this is an easy one, add label with attributed string of type NS attributed string, centered at point, which is a CG point. Okay, I'm just going to create a UI label. I'm going to set its background color to clear, okay, equals clear, because I want, you know, my image to show through around the edges of it. I don't want a big white background or something. I'm going to set the attributed text, obviously, to be this attributed string that was passed in. I'm going to size to fit it. Okay, I don't want that label to be some large random size. I'm going to, what else am I going to do? Oh, yes, I got to position it. Label.center equals the drop point right there. And of course, I have to add it as a subview to myself. And that's it. Let's do it. All right, Let's go get an image. Did I lose my favorite image? Oh no, my favorite, oh there it is. It's my favorite image right here. Okay, so I got my image right here. We can zoom in and out. Okay, we can pick up a B and drop the B, pick up another B, drop the B, maybe we'll put an apple down here. Now, of course, we want to be able to resize these things and move them around, right? So I don't want to waste your time. That's just doing some gesture recognizers. I put those in a little file right here. So let's just throw those in. And you can go look at those later at your leisure. It's very simple gesture recognizers, tap and pinch and pan, things like that. And all we need to do to turn that on is just go down here and say add emoji gesture recognizers to that label. So that just adds these recognizers to the label. Okay, so let's see that in action. Okay, let's get this out of here, drag this in. Now we'll drag a B down here, drag another B. This is what I was doing at the very beginning to demonstrate this. And then we can tap on them, make them bigger, tap on them, make them smaller. Okay, we could even zoom way in if we want to make something really small. Take like an apple, put it down here, make it very, very small. Right? And then when we zoom back out, it will be a tiny little apple, etc. Okay? Now, I'm going back to the slides. Like I say, when I finish the slides, we're not going to be able to do the text demo because we got this midterm coming in. But that's pretty much all we need to do to make this collection view do full drag and drop and all this stuff. It's quite straightforward. And hopefully it makes sense. If you have any questions about it, Piazza is a great place to ask them. All right, let's go back to our slides and talk about UITextField. All right, UITextField. It's a lot like UI label, and you might just think, oh, it's just an editable UI label. It's a little more complicated than that, but not much more. One thing to really think about conceptually UITextField is having editable text fields, especially on the iPhone, is not a very good UI. Okay? And it's really easy to fall in the trap of throwing text fields into your UI and thinking, oh, this is a great UI for doing this, because you're running in the simulator and you got a keyboard and you're just typing away in those text fields, hitting return, going to the next. Whereas the poor user is like, my thumb's like, another damn text field, I hate them. Okay? So it's not a primary input source. If you can find a way to let them choose from a list or otherwise input the data without having to type things, it's better. Okay. Now on the iPad it's not so bad. At least the keyboard is quite large. It's much more accessible. People can put it down and use two hands. Okay, so it's not quite as bad on an iPad, but on an iPhone, don't get fooled. And I see a lot of you doing this in your final projects. You submit these projects to us that are just like, oh my God, this is almost unusable, because we will be testing all your final projects on devices. Okay, we won't be in the simulator, be able to type away. So think about that from your users, whether a text field is what you want. Once you've decided you want a text field, here's how it works. Okay? So the text field is something that obviously throws a keyboard up and lets you enter text. One thing to notice about the keyboard is there's no keyboard object or anything anywhere in iOS. Okay? So the keyboard coming up happens because an object becomes the first responder. So the first responder is the thing that gets the keyboard events from the keyboard. And as soon as something becomes first responder, it starts getting a keyboard, the keyboard will appear. All right? So become first responder is a method you can send to text field, and it will cause it to be the first responder, which will cause the keyboard to come up. And similarly, if you send it resignFirstResponder, it will stop being the first responder and the keyboard will go away. So that is how you make the keyboard come and go in iOS, is by making things become and resign first responder. Okay? So that's important to understand about the keyboards. One thing about a text field that's totally different than a label is that it has a delegate, and that its delegate is the primary way you interact with the text field. Okay? As opposed to a label doesn't even have a delegate. You just ask for its text and set its values, and that's it. Whereas since a text field is editable, as things are being edited, like a selection's changing or someone types something new, you can find out about all of those things going on. Okay? Another example is a lot of times in the keyboard, when the user hits the return key in the keyboard, you want the keyboard to go away, right? So text field should return right there is a method that gets called when the return key is pressed. And inside there, you very likely want to say resignFirstResponder, and that will cause the keyboard to go away. Okay? So that's an example of what you can do with the delegate. Another really important delegate method is textFieldDidEndEditing. Okay? This gets called when it resigns firstResponder. Okay? So if someone is editing in your text field and they type on touch on another text field, you'll resign firstResponder. So if you want to look at the text at that point, you're going to want to implement this delegate method. Okay? Now, having said that, textField is a UI control, so it does have target action, and you can control drag it and have it send certain target action messages on certain activities happening in the text field, and sometimes people hook it up that way without doing the delegate thing. But you kind of need to know this delegate because you need to know what it's capable of doing. So you'll definitely want to look up the UITextField delegate protocol and see what are all the things you can find out about what's happening when editing is happening in a text field. All right, the keyboard. So since there's no keyboard object in iOS, what if you want to configure the keyboard, like set whether it does autocorrect, right? You know how it does all that annoying autocorrect? I didn't say annoying, okay? It does autocorrect, and you don't want it to do that because it doesn't make sense in your text field. You can turn that off, but you do all that by talking to the text field, not by talking to the keyboard. Anybody who puts up a keyboard is going to implement this protocol called UITextInputTraits, and it has all these keyboard activities, and it's that guy's responsibility to get the keyboard to do the right thing. Okay? The keyboard also has, in the TextInputTraits protocol, it also has inputAccessoryView, which lets you put a little view on the keyboard, right at the top of the keyboard. If you had some special buttons or something you want, you can put them in there, so that's kind of cool. All right. Now, one thing, I'm not going to even talk about this slide yet, but later in the quarter I will, but I'm putting it up here for reference. You can go back and look at it. It's important to understand that when the keyboard comes up, it covers up your views, right? The keyboard does not move things out of the way normally. It comes up. Now, there are some classes like the UI Table View Controller bundle, right? The thing where you can drag out and get a whole UI Table View controller with the table view. That does. That will scroll things up out of the way of the keyboard. But normally the keyboard just comes up and your stuff is behind it. And I'll tell you, another huge problem with final projects is people have only run them in the simulator, and when you run it on a device and you press on a text field, the keyboard comes up and covers that text field. Okay, and so you can't even enter any information in that text field. Okay, that's an extremely common thing, and we will basically not be able to test certain parts of your app because we can't even type in to the text field. So it is your responsibility to move things out of the way. Now, when I talk about an NS notification, hopefully next week, I will tell you how to find out that the keyboard has come up, where it's come up, and then you can react by moving your UI out of the way, hopefully by scrolling it in scroll view, but you might have to do it some other way. Okay, there's a lot of other stuff in TextField you can look in the documentation for. You've already seen like the auto shrink of UI label. TextField has that as well, and you can control it like setting the minimum font size and stuff like that. You know, when you click in the text field, do you want it to clear out the text that used to be in there and start afresh, or do you want it to leave the text that used to be in there? Those kinds of things, you can do all that. It has some little accessory views that you can put on the left and right. It's a pretty powerful little object. Okay, so coming up now is going to be this demo, but again, we have to get out of here because of this midterm coming, so we'll be doing that on Monday. Your homework 5 is out. It's posted already. It's essentially to do your own collection view and table view, all right, with some drag and drop, of course, and with a little UI text field as well. If you want to wait until I do the demo on Monday to do the text field part, it's a very minor part of the assignment. You could do that. You could just do the rest of the assignment. I know you all like to get started on your assignments early. You do your whole assignment before Monday, except for that, that's fine, and then on Tuesday you could work on the text field. It's not a huge part of the assignment. Again, no more Friday sections. And then next week, I'll be talking about the final project requirements, and we'll also be talking about persistence. Okay, we have this nice EmojiArt thing, but as soon as I quit my app and started again, oh, I lost all my work. Okay, so we're going to fix that next week and learn how to make things persist between launching of the app. And that's a fairly small topic, so we'll actually be doing some other stuff as well next week. And then your final assignment, assignment number 6, will probably go out next Wednesday and be due the next Wednesday. And then no more assignments the rest of the quarter because you'll have your final project. Okay, so your final project is a 3-week-long thing, so you won't have any homework during the time you're working on your final project. All right? Okay, that's it. I will see you next Monday.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.